Welcome to the AI in Business podcast brought to you by Raw Media. This is the podcast that explores how AI is transforming business, technology, and the future of work. I'm Chris Towers, one of your hosts for the show. I'm the founder and head of events at Raw Media. Over the past 15 years, I've spent a lot of time working on events focused around business technology and more recently, AI. What I've noticed is wherever you go, AI is dominating the conversation. Every conference, every meeting, and every LinkedIn feed seems to have another opinion on where it's all heading. Joined by my co-host, Nick Hodder. Nick, how are you today?
I'm very warm, Chris.
All the windows and doors shut to ensure audio is good for this.
Although, aren't you supposed to keep are you supposed to keep them shut anyway? It seems counterintuitive, but apparently you're supposed to stop hot air from getting in. But it's not any cooler, as far as I can tell. I am Nick Hodder, specialise in AI and digital transformation. I am delighted to join Chris for our inaugural podcast.
Nick, what the hell's the podcast about? Why are we doing this and what we're looking to kind of uncover here?
We are at a fascinating sort of point, I'm sure everyone will agree, in terms of understanding how AI, there are wider technologies as well, but primarily how AI is impacting businesses, our operating models, the cultures in our kind of workplaces, and what that means for professionals whose role it is to introduce technology to or use technology to improve businesses, people and culture, rather than just the implementation of technology. And that's been an evolution of itself outside of AI. Mm-hmm. This move from understanding that technology itself can help a business, and of course it can, to technology potentially transforming a business. But if you attempt to use technology to transform a business and you don't take people with you on that journey, then it's potentially doomed to fail. And as you know, Chris, we've been talking about this for a very long time now. We've seen this kind of evolution of technology, along with almost sometimes a sort of stagnation or sort of difficulty within businesses to get some of these improvements over the line to actually make digital transformation or AI transformations have the real impact that we know they can have. And that's led to you and I, Chris, as well as lots of my peers, certainly having discussions about how we remove some of those barriers, how we look at our businesses and organizations to learn from each other about what works and what doesn't work. And we've all been involved in an evolution of thinking. So I think right now is the perfect time to actually launch this podcast because AI is exacerbating all of that. The other thing is I want to make sure that we have a fun podcast, an interesting podcast. And we're not just going to talk about the latest news, that we'll dive a little bit deeper and find out what that actually means to people.
Well, that's it, exactly. And I think we're top and tailed here quite well. You're the kind of the more technical mind that actually knows what you're talking about with regards to kind of AI and business enterprise AI.
Depends who you ask.
And then for context, I'm working in the event space, so I'm more kind of expert at information gathering, trying to make sense of it. I think is a great way of kind of educating people as well that maybe sit on the the more strategic side that have less of the technical know-how, because I think as part of this podcast and discussion, we want to really kind of cut through the hype and speak to the people making it happen and exploring what AI really means for organizations today, like you said. And so we want to really bring it all together. So I think the best way to start maybe for this episode, Nick, is looking at some conversations happening in the boardroom, what kind of the big takes right now on kind of AI in business, and then perhaps we can dive a little bit deeper into some of the kind of the stories dominating AI headlines of the kind of the last week.
We're kind of doing this podcast off the back of the latest AI in business event in London. I think that was a really good opportunity to understand where our kind of peers are in terms of thinking around kind of AI. And a lot of that actually is focused around, interestingly, like the governance and policies around AI. We talk to a lot of people, a kind of broad cross-section of professionals around technology and business, through to kind of IT, people and CIOs who are really focused on, that governance and compliance and cybersecurity, essentially, through to people who are leading digital transformations that are really, I guess, income focused. Lots of people we speak to are in public sector or in charity or in the cultural sector. So I think it's worth noting that a lot of organizations are interested in kind of what AI can drive in terms of commercial revenue and customer engagement, as well as cost savings. And so I remember when we had these conversations a year and a half, 2 years ago, there was lots of conversations about aiming for a 5% cost reduction in your organization. And I think what's happened now is those conversations have started to mature somewhat, and there's a broader view of what AI could do on both the opportunity side and the risk side. Yeah. So really interesting times, and we've seen. So there was some news. I don't know if you want to tell us more about it from Lloyds about essentially hiring, which is great news. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It kind of contradicts itself a little bit. So Lloyds have just announced this week plans to recruit 300 AI specialists as part of a major investment primarily in an agentic AI, looking at systems that can autonomously plan and complete tasks. And apparently these new hires are going to be supporting projects including fraud detection, personalized banking. I think there's a big focus on that personalization side, and of course the internal productivity. And they'll be joining an existing team of around 1,000 people, I believe. Going back to your comments around cost saving, they're saying that they've already delivered, I think it was around £50 million in business value, and expects that to double this year. Not sure on the cost savings side, but that's kind of the numbers being generated from the value. So looking more at kind of that ROI. And the contradiction really is that it's going to creating these specialist roles is going to be increasing automation, so likely to reduce some jobs in the future, reinforcing the need for kind of workforce reskilling and responsible AI adoption. They're hiring hundreds of AI experts while openly acknowledging that AI could eliminate other roles, highlighting basically that AI isn't simply about replacing jobs, it's about fundamentally changing the skills organizations need.
Do you think this is... I think what's slightly concerning about this is maybe it's unfair to call this, but it sounds like a bit of a punt, right? So that, is it going to have a specific impact? It's unclear when you're reading kind of the release about it that there is a kind of clear line drawn from the AI will take on this load, which will improve this efficiency, which will save us this amount of money, or maybe that work has been done, right? And maybe it is. I think what I'm curious about is I'm not actually saying that that's a bad move, okay? Because if you wait until you've gone into intricate detail about understanding which of your processes you could offload to AI and which you can't, you risk, especially an organization with hundreds of thousands of employees, you risk essentially stagnating for a very long time before you actually do something. So I think I'm sympathetic with the idea that maybe you just start. What do you think, Chris?
I think this story demonstrates that AI is moving from kind of that experimentation stage to more of kind of like a workforce strategy. I think it's showing that, traditional industries, Lloyds Banking, they're a big kind of legacy type bank. They're betting heavily on AI. But for me, and a lot of the kind of the conversations I hear around, the fear factor, I think it does raise questions about future jobs, productivity, and of course, organizational structure. I think bringing all of that in does kind of maybe unsteady the kind of the balance in the workforce as this shift kind of, takes place. And I think it just goes back to the old adage of, is AI creating jobs, replacing jobs, or is it simply just changing jobs? Is it a shift?
I mean, it's got to be all of the above, right? And I think the question to which nobody knows the answer is how that flows. The one thing that gives me hope about jobs is the fact that I've witnessed so many giant organizations attempt to digitally transform. And I've seen that go very, very slowly and very, very badly. Yeah. So the great news for your job is that unless that suddenly changes, which I think this is what Lloyds are trying to solve with this, actually, and I think it's not a bad idea at all. Essentially, if we continue to do digital transformation or AI transformation in the way that we've done digital transformation, which is massive sort of programs of work, right?
Yeah.
that will take a very long time, and the delays within that program of work is not a delay in a developer writing some code, right? Those are that's organizational friction, and the larger the organization, the more friction there is, which also means the larger the organization, the more sort of monolithic and dreadfully slow is the transformation. So I think Lloyds have got the right idea. It's worth saying, I think I've told you this before. At least twice a year, I meet someone with the job title Chief Technology Officer at Lloyds Banking Group. And every time I meet them, I say, do you know Brian? He's also a Chief Technology Officer at Lloyds Banking Group. They say no. And I'm like, how can you not know each other? You've all got the same job title.
Yeah.
And so it's not clear whether, how group wide. It sounds from the press release that it's kind of group wide. But that's huge. When your chief technology officers don't know who each other are, then that is, I guess, A, probably the problem they're seeking to solve. But B, I still think it's probably not very easy. I'm building stuff with kind of agentic AI myself, and I can see, wow, this could replace that. It could replace that. This could be done very, very quickly. I don't think it will be, because the issue was probably not, even though we probably like to complain, your senior software engineer. If they can deliver 5 days of work in one day, they can't have the month's worth of meetings, and that's where the friction is. Yeah. So be really interesting to hear from people listening to this about their kind of takes. But I suspect that if you're from our world, you can see this, and it's not me being mean about the people delivering digital transformations. They're very nice, very talented, often people who fully understand the problem, but what they're dealing with is often 100-year-old organization. In some of these banks are 200-300 years old, right?
Yeah, I mean, disconnected, aren't they? I mean, within my job role, it becomes sometimes a bit of a nightmare scenario. I'm building, try to curate an agenda for a digital transformation conference, bringing in all these, different narratives and perspectives. And like you say, you go into the larger organizations when you're seeing who could share some, valuable information or insights, best practice, and you're kind of going through, and there's multiple CTOs, head of technologies, and it's, who's leading this, and you speak to one person and they don't know, like you said, the other person, and it just gets a little bit confusing. And obviously, if we're confused from the outside looking in, and looking at everything being so disconnected, it's like, how do you drive change and transformation of any level, not just technology, if you've got all these different kind of almost siloed departments of technology that aren't talking to each other, which creates a bigger problem and a wider problem, going back to what you were saying about the people aspect of driving change or any level of transformation.
I think there's a risk that when you've got these very siloed organizations with very fragmented kind of IT and technology teams, that what you potentially end up doing is automating a lot of stuff with AI, but automating small chunks of processes in sort of discrete areas of the organization. And I was talking to someone I know who works for a large insurance company, and he asked me, he's not in the IT and technology world. He asked me, should I be worried about, my job being automated away? And I said, I think the biggest risk is not that your organization automates your job away. It's that your organization probably tries to automate a lot of processes and does so, but quite slowly in the grand scheme of things. I mean, quite quickly for them, I imagine, but quite slowly in the grand scheme of things. If the problem is that there genuinely is the opportunity for, like, I'm not going to say one-person startups, but essentially, or like one-person unicorns. But I think, especially for a lot of these organizations, I'm thinking about sort of legal profession and others, where, areas of the legal profession where case law is very clear, very well documented, and AI can very quickly learn from it. There is an opportunity for self-service, AI-driven legal services that could be delivered at the fraction of a cost that a lawyer would deliver them for. And so if you're a massive legal practice, your biggest threat isn't if you work at a big legal practice, your biggest threat isn't necessarily having your job automated away. It's that your organization is massively disrupted by a bunch of very small startups. And this happens all the time. And I bang on about sort of like this. If you know me, you might not know me, sort of Kodak and Blockbuster, where actually they were where everyone else is with AI today. That the internet arrived, and Kodak were like, this is brilliant. Now you'll be able to go on the internet and find the nearest place you could process your film. This will help us. We'll get more business because more people will be able to find us. Blockbuster, same thing, right? Now it's very easy to find your local Blockbuster. You go on the internet and you can find the prices. You can find what they've got in stock. Amazing. So that is a good thing, right? They're thinking the internet is a good thing, right? But actually, what the internet does for Blockbuster ultimately is, even though actually they were probably ahead on streaming than they were beyond Netflix in terms of that process. They're investing in fiber networks to try to start streaming, but the problem is they were tied into long-term leases for all these video stores. And so the change happened so quickly. It wasn't that they didn't know it was going to happen. It just happened a lot quicker than they thought it would. And they were not able to pivot their business because they had massive capital kind of expenditure that they couldn't pivot from that, or operational expenditure in terms of the leases. So then you've got Kodak, who invented the digital camera. And I think were patiently, like, they knew that revolution was going to happen, but I think they thought it would take 15 years, and it took 5. And the internet that is one of the things that spurred that digital photography, right? Because all of a sudden you don't have to print anything out; you can just download it from your camera and stick it straight on the internet. So that's the real threat for me, that actually, if you don't get on top of your AI transformation, if you can't get leverage from your board to move quickly and make interesting decisions like this Lloyds one, then you are open to disruption. The thing that is going to remove more jobs is not that your job gets automated away. It's that some other company figures out an entirely different way to solve the problem that you solve with your giant company, with your thousands of people. So I think that's the biggest risk. And what it means for a lot of the people listening to this is actually use that with your boards as leverage to try to open up conversations, not about technology, but about operating models. Like, if we reinvented our operating model using the technology available to us today, what would that look like? I think it's going to involve a lot more imagination than we've had to use previously.
100%. Anything else that you've seen in the news this week?
So this is kind of slightly on a tangent, but there's a company called Nothing Phone. I think they're technically kind of London-based, although I suspect the phone is not made in London or England. They make a phone called the CMF phone, which is their sort of budget one. It's like 200 quid. I really like it. It's a really interesting phone. You can attach lots of different accessories to it. I bought my mum one. Okay, it's really, and if you need a phone for your kid, I think that's actually that's a really good. I don't actually social media anymore, so maybe they don't need a phone. But I'd recommend that one. But it turns out they are not going to release a new version of that phone this year because the RAM is so expensive. It's a £200 phone. Right. So RAM is now so expensive that they're like, we literally can't afford to release this phone. We'll lose money. And what this looks like to me is that potentially, if this continues with the cost of RAM, and I can't see the cost of RAM going down because the demands is going to be sky high based on the kind of the applications of AI. This machine I'm using now has an extortionate amount of RAM. I dread to think how much this computer would cost today, but possibly 3 times more than I paid for it. You need, if you're going to, I run sort of local models, AI models on this machine, so it needs lots of RAM, right? And so everyone wants a machine with lots of RAM. If you're going to run local AI on phone, like Pixel phones do, increasingly one of the biggest factors are going to be RAM.
Yeah.
So this means that the cheaper laptops are going to be less cheap, or less of them will exist. Cheaper phones will be less cheap, or less of them will exist. But also businesses and employees need laptops and need phones, and they will all get considerably more expensive as well. I am just fascinated by how this will play out, because it strikes me that RAM is like a utility. RAM and compute, like memory and compute and storage, feel like utilities. You'll see the stock prices of these organizations, by the way, who make this stuff, like skyrocketing, right? So investors can see this. But what does that do to the consumer market, right? And what does that do for businesses trying to arm their employees, like with the kit that they need to do their job, or work with AI? I think it's going to have a really big impact. And it feels like a utility, right? So part of me thinks, like, if there is, legislation around kind of AI, increasingly there's lots of concern about sort of data centers, etc. But, should there be some aspect of this where RAM and compute is considered to be a utility, and some of it is essentially reserved for people who actually need it, rather than just acquired by sort of giant corporations? Like, otherwise, SpaceX will buy all the RAM.
Yes.
And they can afford it because they're now incredibly rich.
Yes, indeed. With that as well, pivots nicely on the hardware side. Have you heard about the UK government announcing the 1.1 billion AI hardware plan, as very linked into kind of the ambition to build sovereign AI capability, which will look to kind of reduce reliance on foreign-owned AI infrastructure, basically ensuring the UK has the computing power, chips, talent, investment needed to compete globally. Did you see that? I think it was this week or last week. All the details were kind of announced and put publicly.
Yeah, I'm completely aligned with the intent, right? But as with all government policy, it's not necessarily the intent that where it all falls down.
Yes.
Right? And so really that has to be backed up by like solid policy and action.
Okay.
And things that move at the speed of government don't necessarily move particularly quickly. I think sovereign AI is a great idea. I think if you run a business, you're after the cheapest, most effective AI, right? Mm-hmm. So in truth be told, okay, so you might be able to get some big organizations on board with that, but most people, are, if they're feeling under pressure or they're feeling the threat, they're going to get their AI resource where it's most cost effective for them. Yeah. I think that's just the reality of the situation. So there has to be some kind of policy backing that up. I think overall it's a good. If you look at what's happening generally in the EU, this is a good move. This is a smart move and a good move by the UK government.
Yeah, well, they're saying that the £750 million that's part of that package which is to build a new national AI supercomputers expected to be operational by 2030, and obviously looking at things like HS2, not
massive infrastructure deadline.
Yeah, exactly. So I think the business takeaway here is that even if you're not kind of building foundation models, it matters because it affects, where the services are hosted, compliance, supply chain resilience, access to computing power, which we discussed, and obviously the costs of future AI and innovation ecosystems in general.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting. The other thing, because we're talking about building data centers in Britain, what about data centers in space?
Right.
What's interesting, because it if Elon says it, you can sort of potentially write it off as a fever dream. Yeah. But interestingly, the other big tech, the slightly more, it's not unfair to call them normal. I'm going to say normal. The more normal tech CEOs have echoed this. So Sundar Pichai has been, yeah, sure. And like maybe they're humoring Elon.
Yeah.
Or maybe they're signing a deal with SpaceX to put their data centers in space. Microsoft have put data centers at the bottom of the ocean before for cooling. I think that was just an experiment. I don't know if they've done any more kind of with that. But yeah, I guess, there's There's probably some very sensible reasons why you want to put a data center in space. I note that there was some news that the guy from SoftBank, Masayoshi Son, who's the founder of SoftBank, is not a big fan. So he's come out and basically said that he thinks that's mad and that the AI race will be decided by compute on Earth. I think that probably is true because we're quite a long way from data centers in space, aren't we? And when you're filling in your kind of GDPR compliance thing, you have to select your data center.
Yeah, out of this
Is it
world.
is it in the EU? It's kind of directly above the EU for sort of 7 minutes every day. So maybe that counts.
Okay, so I'm going to do a segment now, which we're going to call Bad Robot. And I think we'll try and do this each week, where we kind of highlight a story proving that despite all the hype, AI, it does have the occasional spectacularly bad day. And I was digging through a couple of stories this week, trying to find something appropriate. And although this isn't in true business practice, there was a recent experiment done by Anthropic and Wall Street Journal. Don't know if you've seen this one. And they set the experiment up to see if an AI agent could run a small business. So they just kind of wanted to take a look and see what would happen with this. So it sounded a kind of simple enough task. The agent was tasked with running an office vending machine, and the kind of the business function of that was to keep it stocked, price products sensibly, and make a profit. So running quite a simple business. And it turns out that the AI became incredibly generous. It offered discounts where it definitely shouldn't have. It tried to hand out a PlayStation 5. Looking at this AI and thinking, he's given that autonomy to run the business, but it, lost sight of the actual business objective, which was making money. And I think for me, it was a great reminder that, AI can optimize individual tasks, business processes, and things like that, but it doesn't necessarily understand commercial priorities the same way that humans do. And I think we hear a lot about the human support with regards to AI, and I think in this case it really kind of backs that up.
I think that's a good robot, Chris. I want my robots giving us free PlayStation. I like it.
For the purposes of business application, good kind of Robin Hood approach, but perhaps not great for a business.
Is this the same one? I think Anthropic have been doing this for a while in various guises, but one of the Anthropic experiments, again, it was like a vending machine one, I think, that you could email, started promising that it was going to deliver the goods to the desk. Yeah. And the employee was like, how are you going to do that? And said, well, I'm going to come over at sort of 9:30. I'll be wearing a waistcoat and a red tie. And then the employee said, you can't do that. Yeah. You're just a machine. Yeah. And then it emailed HR to complain about the employee, telling it wasn't real.
Right.
So, well, it's fascinating because now it's sort of it feels like its rights are being infringed, and it feels like it's being abused in the workplace. Which So I do love these Anthropic experiments. I love that Anthropic are willing to do them and be open about sharing the results. Yeah. So long may that continue. But the reason they're doing it is to understand. Oh, okay, it doesn't understand this, and they can then figure out potentially how to solve those problems. I think it's a great way of doing it. There's another one. Maybe we'll come back to this on another day. There's somewhere in Scandinavia. There's an AI running a bakery that's also, it's done quite well in some aspects, but not so. I think at one point it ordered like thousands of tea towels or something. They required 3.
There was actually another one that I dug out in a true business environment, which was the Amazon Web Services AI coding assistant. Apparently it caused a major outage after autonomously deleting and rebuilding part of a production environment. Don't know if you saw that one.
That's a real risk of AI supported software development. But I actually think that we'll talk about this in a future episode. The future is that kind of AI supported software development where AI is writing the kind of majority of the code. but it's all predicated on you putting safeguards in place. I think there's huge opportunities there, but the risk, you need to understand the risk, and people need to be really well trained in terms of how they approach those challenges. But really fascinating week, Chris.
So that's episode 1. Hopefully you've enjoyed our attempt to make sense of one of the fastest moving areas in technology with a few stories and insights there. If you've enjoyed it, please subscribe, leave us a review, tell your colleagues. And of course, if there's a topic you'd like us to tackle in a future episode, do let us know. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, everyone.